Good evening, and welcome back. Tonight, let's take a quiet walk through time, into the forests that once surrounded our ancestors. As you listen, imagine the soft crackle of a campfire nearby, the gentle rhythm of wind weaving through leaves, and a calm voice guiding you deeper into the quiet. You might feel your body begin to relax, your breathing slow, your eyelids a little heavier with each passing moment. Wherever you are listening from, I hope this story brings you peace. What country are you in tonight? And what time is it there? Before we wander too far down this moonlit path, if you enjoy these gentle explorations of history, you can tap the like or subscribe button whenever you wish. No rush at all, perhaps after you've drifted softly into sleep. Now, let's begin our walk through the whispering woods. There was a time when the forest was the edge of the known world. Beyond the fields and villages, there stretched miles of shadow and silence. For the people of the past, nightfall in the woods was both beautiful and uneasy, a world alive with sound, but empty of light. Imagine standing at the edge of that ancient forest. The air is cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. You hear the faint call of an owl far away, and the rustle of something unseen among the branches. The path before you fades into darkness, and you wonder what might be waiting beyond the trees. For many generations, the woods were places of respect. People moved carefully there, believing that every sound meant something. A snapping twig could signal an animal, or perhaps just the forest shifting in its sleep. But in those moments of quiet, the imagination filled every shadow. As the fire burns softly beside you, picture the small communities that once lived at the forest's edge. They depended on the woods for warmth, for food, and for shelter. Yet, they also understood how easily one could become lost inside. The forest gave, but it could also take away. Each night, stories would arise with the smoke of the fires. Elders spoke of strange shapes seen at dusk, of travelers who swore they heard whispers that weren't from any living creature. These were not tales meant to frighten, they were reminders to move gently through the world, to notice the quiet signs around you. Let your mind drift for a moment. You might hear the soft crackle of the fire again, or imagine the cool night air brushing past your face. Nothing to fear here, just the rhythm of history unfolding slowly, softly, as if told by the forest itself. People once said that the woods could feel your presence, that the trees seemed to breathe, and that the stillness could change if someone walked through with too much noise or pride. These weren't beliefs of worship, but reflections of awe, simple respect for a world so much larger than themselves. And if you listen closely, even now, you might understand why they felt that way. The woods after dark have a language of their own, a sigh of wind, the echo of footsteps, the quiet pulse of the earth beneath your feet. For those who lived long ago, it was enough to believe that the night was alive, not with monsters, but with mystery. Before we continue, take a slow breath in. Feel the calm spreading through your chest, like warmth from a small fire. Let it settle you deeper into the present moment. The forest of history stretches quietly ahead, and we have many gentle miles yet to walk. The deeper one walked into the woods, the quieter the world became. The wind softened, the insects hushed, and only the faint creak of trees remained. It was said that this silence was not emptiness, but listening, the forest pausing, waiting to see who had entered its domain. Travelers who moved through these dark paths often described a strange feeling. The air felt thicker somehow, as though the forest carried its own breath. Some said it was only the dampness of night and the chill of mist. Others wondered if the woods themselves were aware, not thinking, but simply existing in a way that reminded them how small human life could feel among ancient trees. In some regions, people left small signs behind when they passed through. A pile of stones, a twig tied in a knot, or a strip of cloth on a branch, gentle reminders to mark the way back home. They weren't offerings or rituals, just ways to remember their steps, like breadcrumbs of memory scattered through the wild. As you imagine this now, perhaps you can hear the faint rustle of leaves in your own mind. The rhythm is slow, steady, peaceful. It draws you inward, as if your thoughts themselves are walking through that same soft darkness, guided by memory rather than sight. Every culture that lived near great forests had its own way of describing them. Some called them dangerous, others sacred, but nearly all agreed. The woods held secrets, not the kind meant to be solved, but the kind meant to be respected, the quiet mysteries that live in the natural world. At night, when the moonlight filtered through the branches, shadows played tricks on the eyes. What looked like a person could turn out to be a tree stump. A flicker of movement might only be a bird settling its wings. But for those who watched long enough, even the most ordinary shapes could seem alive. Let your thoughts rest on that image for a moment. A path lit only by a faint moon, the sound of your footsteps softened by damp leaves. The forest feels endless, yet strangely kind. If you listen, there's a rhythm to it, a slow heartbeat that feels like the world itself, breathing in and out. In old times, people believed that listening to the forest was a kind of wisdom. The one who could move quietly, observe patiently, and leave without harm was seen as a person of understanding. The forest tested patience more than courage. It reminded people that peace was not found in conquering the wild, but in walking beside it. Sometimes, children were told gentle bedtime stories about travelers who lost their way but found calm by trusting the sounds around them. The whisper of a stream, the call of a night bird, each sound became a guide. In this way, the forest was both a maze and a teacher, a mirror of the human heart, mysterious, fearful at times, but full of quiet grace. If you were to stand there now, with the stars hidden by branches, you might feel the same thing those travelers did, the weight of stillness, the comfort of distance, the sense that time moves differently among the trees. It's as if the forest holds its breath, waiting for dawn. And as our story slows, let that stillness settle around you. The night grows cooler, the fire softer, the world quieter. Whatever you carry in your thoughts tonight, let the calm of the woods keep it safe until morning. The path will still be there when you wake, quiet, unchanged, and waiting under the whispering trees. In the quiet hours of history, before the hum of cities and the noise of roads, people saw the forest as something alive, not a being to worship or fear, but a world that breathed beside them. It was vast, unpredictable, and deeply present, like an old companion that spoke without words. The sigh of wind through pine needles, the slow dripping of rain from branch to soil, the gentle way light shifted with every passing cloud. To them, this was not superstition, it was simple observation, the understanding that nature was not still, but living. When people walked into the woods, they didn't rush. The old paths taught patience. Every sound carried meaning. A crack in the underbrush, the call of a bird, or the creaking of an unseen branch. Each reminded them that the forest existed on its own terms, far beyond human control. At times, travelers would pause before entering, not to perform rituals, but to breathe, to steady their minds before stepping into the unknown. In that brief moment of silence, they reconnected with humility. They knew that, inside, the rules of the open world did not apply. The forest was older than them, and they treated it as such. As you picture this now, let the rhythm of the forest fill your imagination. Hear the wind sweeping softly between trunks, the faint call of a night bird, and the slow, steady beat of calm returning to your chest. There is no rush here, just the gentle reminder that stillness is also a kind of strength. Historians note that many communities treated forests like neighbors. People took only what they needed, wood for warmth, fruit for food, and then left the rest untouched. It wasn't devotion, it was balance. They understood that the one who created the world had given it order, and within that order, every living thing had a place. The more one learned to listen, the more the forest revealed. It spoke in patterns, the return of birds in spring, the fall of leaves before the cold. These changes reminded people of time's gentle cycles. Nothing in nature rushed, and nothing was wasted. To those who paid attention, the forest was not silent at all. Now and then, people described how walking under tall trees felt like being inside a great hall. The trunks stood like pillars, the branches like arches, the leaves whispering above. It wasn't about worship, it was wonder. The kind of quiet awe that humbles the heart, reminding us that creation holds beauty far beyond human hands. Take a breath here, let your shoulders loosen, and imagine that cool forest air around you. The ground beneath your feet is soft with fallen leaves. Every step feels lighter, as if the earth itself is guiding you to rest. The forest was never just a place. It was a teacher, one that spoke in silence. And for those who walked gently enough, that silence became a conversation. A reminder that peace doesn't always need words. Sometimes it lives in the spaces between them. At night, when mist drifted low across the ground, the forest seemed to breathe. The air would cool, and a hush would fall between the trees. Travelers said the stillness felt alive, as though the woods were exhaling after a long day beneath the sun. It wasn't fear they felt, but presence. A deep awareness that they were part of something greater than themselves. Farmers and woodcutters who worked near the trees often spoke of listening before they began their day. They paid attention to the wind, the moisture in the soil, and the call of morning birds. These were their guides, small signs that helped them understand the forest's mood. It was not belief in unseen powers, but respect for the natural rhythm that held everything together. If you close your eyes now, you can almost imagine it. Dew gathering on moss, the gentle hum of insects, the slow drip of water from one leaf to another. Each sound is soft, almost invisible, yet it forms a language of calm. The same language that countless generations once heard before us. From this perspective, the forest became less of a place and more of a mirror. People began to notice that how they moved through the woods often reflected how they moved through life. The impatient stumbled, the cautious found their path, and the ones who listened, truly listened, discovered that silence itself could be a companion. Every now and then, you might catch yourself hearing something faint, perhaps in your own room, a soft hum, the breath of air conditioning, the rhythm of your heartbeat. That quiet, too, is part of nature's pattern. The stillness of the forest lives within it, reminding you that peace is often found in the smallest moments. In many parts of the world, old forests became boundaries between the familiar and the wild. Beyond them lay the unknown mountains, rivers, lands uncharted. Standing at the edge of such a forest, people understood their limits. They couldn't control everything, and in that realization came humility, a truth that life is vast, and humans are but one gentle thread woven within it. Some early travelers wrote that they could sense changes in the forest's mood before a storm. The air grew thick, Birds fell silent, and animals disappeared into their burrows. Long before scientific explanation, people recognized these patterns as nature's quiet warnings. It was learning through patience, the kind that required listening more than speaking. Even today, when most of us no longer live near wild woods, something in us still responds to that feeling. The sound of rain on a window, or the rustle of wind through trees, it touches the same part of the human heart that once stood still at the forest's edge. A calm awareness that the world is alive and we are allowed to rest within it. Take another slow breath. The air around you is calm, the firelight gentle. Let your mind settle as the forest once did at dusk, unhurried, balanced, and whole. No voices, no demands, only the quiet presence of time moving softly forward. And as the night deepens, remember this: the people of the past didn't need to name the forest as alive. They could simply feel it, and perhaps, even now, we can too, in the rustle of leaves outside, in the hush of evening, in the peace that comes when we finally stop to listen. Night in the forest was unlike anything else. When the last trace of sunlight disappeared behind the hills, shadows seemed to move on their own. The air thickened, carrying the scent of damp wood and distant rain. Every sound grew louder: the crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind along the bark. To those who walked among the trees, it felt as though unseen eyes were watching. This feeling wasn't fear in the way we understand it now. It was awareness, the natural alertness that comes when the world grows quiet and the unknown takes shape around you. Before artificial light, night was a different realm. People didn't yet divide the world into safe and dangerous, known and unknown. They simply accepted that darkness had its own rules. Travelers moving through deep woods often described the sense of being followed. They would stop, look behind them, and see nothing, only silence. Yet that silence carried weight, as though something had paused its own movement the very instant they turned around. It was a reminder that the forest at night belonged to its true inhabitants, not to human visitors passing through. Most of these watchers were real creatures, of course: foxes, owls, wolves, or deer moving through the brush. But to the people of centuries past, these small glimmers of movement could stir the imagination. The gleam of eyes in reflected moonlight looked too deliberate, too knowing. It was easy to wonder what else might share the darkness with them. Pause for a moment, and let your own imagination wander. Picture a faint silver glow filtering through tall branches. You stand on a narrow path, surrounded by sound and shadow. Nothing moves, yet you can sense the life hidden all around you. That quiet, that breathless stillness, is part of what once shaped so many stories. In the days before science could explain the glow of eyes in the dark, people relied on stories to give meaning to what they saw. Some said the eyes belonged to guardians of the forest, protectors of balance, who ensured that travelers showed respect. Others said the eyes were simply reflections of animals at rest, glimmering back what little moonlight remained. The truth, as always, lived somewhere between wonder and reason. For villagers who lived near thick woods, night was not something to be conquered. It was endured gently, patiently, until dawn returned. They built fires, gathered close, and spoke in low voices. The circle of light became their small world, surrounded by endless shadow. The eyes beyond the fire were distant reminders of how little light humans truly needed to feel safe. As you listen, imagine sitting by that same quiet fire. The flames flicker, the wood pops softly, and the air carries a hint of cool mist. Beyond the glow, the forest waits vast, listening, alive. There's no threat here. Only the ancient rhythm of nature watching over itself. Some travelers, alone on long journeys, found comfort in those moments. They believed that whatever watched them in the woods was not an enemy but a companion, a presence reminding them that they were not alone. Whether it was truth or imagination didn't matter. What mattered was the calm that came from believing the night was aware but not cruel. Take a gentle breath now. Let that thought rest with you. Awareness without fear, darkness without harm, a world full of quiet observers, each fulfilling its part in the great pattern of life. Even in silence, something is always watching, not to judge, but simply to be. As the night deepened, the boundaries between sound and silence grew thin. People learned to tell the difference between the shuffle of leaves in the wind and the deliberate step of an animal nearby. Their ears became their compass, guiding them through a world they could barely see. In this way, darkness became not just a challenge, but a teacher. Villagers living close to dense forests often spoke of how the woods came alive after sunset. The daytime creatures retreated, and others took their place. The soft hoot of an owl, the rustling of mice in the grass, the slow movement of deer between the trees. These sounds built a rhythm, a kind of natural lullaby that marked the heartbeat of the night. In time, people began to recognize patterns. When the forest grew silent, they knew something was near, perhaps a predator, perhaps the wind before a storm. Every sound carried meaning, and every pause carried warning. The night trained people to listen deeply, to sense rather than to see. Let yourself listen now, even in this quiet room. Notice the stillness between my words. That same stillness once surrounded the travelers of old, calm, patient, and full of presence. It's a silence that doesn't demand anything. It simply exists, inviting rest. Many of the old tales about glowing eyes and whispering trees weren't stories of terror at all. They were ways to explain the strange beauty of the world at night. When people didn't understand what they saw, they gave it meaning, not to spread fear, but to remind one another to move gently through creation, never carelessly. Some travelers even claimed that the forest seemed to guide them. A flicker of reflected light ahead, the faint shimmer of eyes in the dark, it helped them stay on the path. Later, they realized those glimmers came from small animals watching quietly from a distance. Yet, even knowing that, the feeling of being guided never left them. To sit in the forest at night was to experience time differently. The minutes stretched and softened, measured not by clocks, but by the slow turn of the moon and the hiss of the fire. In that endless quiet, a kind of peace would settle, not excitement, not fear, just deep stillness. The same stillness that people now search for when they lie awake, waiting for sleep to come. Some historians believe these nightly experiences shaped human storytelling itself. The shadows, the lights, the sounds, all of them became symbols in the earliest myths and folk tales. But beyond the stories, there was something simpler, an awareness that the night sky, the animals, and the people were part of one vast, balanced design. Take another slow breath. Let the calm of the woods fill the space around you. In the distance, you might imagine the faint reflection of moonlight in a pair of watchful eyes, not threatening, but curious, as if the forest itself were gently awake. And when the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, those eyes would fade, replaced by the gold of morning light. The watchers would return to their hiding places, and the forest would rest again. The night would keep its secrets, soft and unspoken, waiting for another traveler, another story, another quiet listener like you. In the quiet villages that once bordered vast forests, the night held many questions. When a traveler left and did not return, families looked toward the woods for answers. The forest became a place where people's hopes and fears intertwined, not because they believed in unseen forces, but because the unknown always feels larger than the world we know. Long before written maps and clear paths, the woods could swallow a person whole. Mist would rise from the ground, paths would fade under fallen leaves, and a single wrong turn could lead one deeper and deeper into silence. Those who waited at home began to imagine that their loved ones never truly vanished, that a part of them lingered in the wind, in the sound of branches swaying, or in the faint echo of footsteps after dark. To them, the forest was a keeper of memory. When they spoke of spirits, they weren't talking about something divine or sacred, only the traces of human presence left behind. The memory of laughter, the sound of a familiar voice carried by the wind, or the comfort of believing that someone lost was not entirely gone. These were not stories of worship, but of grief softened by imagination. Sometimes, when the wind passed through narrow valleys, it produced a low hum. People said it sounded like a sigh, gentle, almost human. They would pause, listen, and for a moment feel as though the forest itself was mourning alongside them. It brought comfort to believe that nature shared their sorrow. Pause here for a breath. The air in your imagination grows cool, still, and kind. This isn't a haunted world, it's a remembering one. Every sound, every shadow, is simply a trace of those who came before, folded quietly into the rhythm of the earth. Villagers told stories by firelight, not to frighten, but to remind. They said that when you heard a whisper in the trees, it wasn't a ghost, it was a lesson. A gentle nudge from history to stay on the path, to move slowly, and to never take light for granted. In their hearts, the lost were not trapped in the forest, they had simply become part of it. When winter came and snow fell heavy on the branches, people said the woods grew silent out of respect. It was their way of describing the hush of nature, the stillness that feels like remembrance. And when the first thaw returned, they'd hear the melting snow drip like soft applause, as though the forest itself was awakening again. You can almost hear it now, the soft wind through bare trees, the gentle creak of frozen wood. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing there at dawn, your breath visible in the cold. The world is empty of voices, yet full of presence. That quiet space between sound and memory is where the old stories lived. Even today, when we walk through old forests, we sometimes feel it, that subtle weight of history, the sense that others have walked the same path long before us. It isn't fear, it's recognition. The forest has seen so much, and it carries every story softly, like dust on the wind. Take another slow breath. Let the calm of those woods surround you. The night is no longer something to avoid. It's simply another page in the book of the world, written in silence and read by those who know how to listen. As centuries passed, the idea of the forest as a keeper of memory never truly faded. Even when towns grew and lanterns lit the roads, people still spoke in hushed tones about certain places where the wind carried whispers. It was never said with fear, only respect. The woods had seen what people could not, and they remembered in silence. Travelers who stopped at forest inns often exchanged quiet stories. One might say they'd heard footsteps on an empty path. Another might swear they felt someone walking beside them for a while, though no one was there when they looked. They didn't describe it as haunting, only as company, a kind of unseen companionship offered by the night itself. In a way, these stories helped people live with loss. When families lost someone to the wilderness, the idea that the person's presence still lingered gave peace to the heart. They could imagine their loved one resting among the trees, their memory carried by the forest's breath, never alone, always remembered. Pause for a moment and listen to your own breath. That soft rhythm is the same one nature has followed since the beginning of time. In it, memory and calm coexist. Even when things fade, their traces remain, shaping the world in quiet ways. Over time, these tales became part of local folklore, not because people wanted to believe in the supernatural, but because they needed stories that could hold grief gently. A missing traveler, a flicker of light in the mist, a path that always feels watched, but never threatening. Each story was a way of saying, we are never fully gone from the places we love. The forest, with all its silence, became a bridge between the living and the past. Every crack of a branch, every drifting leaf, reminded people that life continued endlessly reshaping itself. What was lost to sight could still be felt in sound, scent, and the faint memories carried by the wind. Even the way people built their homes reflected that idea. Windows faced the tree line, doors opened toward open fields. They wanted to remain close to what they couldn't fully understand. To them, the forest was not something to escape, it was something to live beside, like an old story told over and over. Always slightly different, yet always true. Sometimes, when people worked in the woods, cutting timber, gathering herbs, tending to animals, they would stop and simply listen, not out of superstition, but habit. The stillness of the forest helped them remember that every sound, every breath, had purpose. It reminded them that even when something is gone, its impact lingers quietly. Take another slow breath now. Let that idea rest in your thoughts. Nothing truly disappears, it transforms, settles, becomes part of the world around us. The people of the past knew this not through philosophy, but through living it, watching nature's endless cycle of loss and renewal. And as the fire burns low, the night grows still again. The forest outside waits in silence, not as a graveyard, but as a memory keeper. Those who walked before us are part of that hush, not ghosts, but echoes of time, folded gently into the earth. And when the wind passes through the trees, it carries their stories, still soft, still present, still at peace. When night fell and the forest grew darker than imagination itself, people turned to the simplest of all comforts, fire. It was more than light or warmth. It was safety, companionship, and calm. A small circle of glowing embers became a barrier between the known and the unknown, between what could be seen and what was left to the shadows. In the silence of the woods, the crackling of a fire felt alive. Each pop of sap bursting from a log reminded listeners that the night could be gentle. The flames flickered and danced, painting the faces of travelers in gold and orange. The warmth wasn't only physical, it reached something deeper, a reminder that they were not alone in the dark. Fire had been with humankind since the earliest days of memory. It allowed people to gather, to speak, and to rest. Around it, stories were told, food was shared, and fears grew quieter. For those who wandered far from home, fire was the closest thing to comfort they could carry. Imagine sitting before one now, the air cool and damp around you, the forest behind a veil of shadow. Each flame moves like a heartbeat, steady and calm. You can hear the wood sigh as it burns, a slow rhythm that lulls your thoughts into stillness. Many ancient travelers believed that the circle of light from a fire marked the boundary of safety. Beyond it lay the realm of the unknown animals, weather, and silence. But within it, there was peace, a small, human space carved out of the vastness of the world. The glow of a campfire had a way of pulling people together. Even those who traveled alone often found others drawn to the same light. For a moment, strangers became companions, united not by words, but by warmth. In the language of the night, a fire said, "You are safe here." Pause for a moment. Let your mind drift toward that warmth. Imagine the glow resting softly against your skin, the gentle sound of firewood cracking as the night deepens. This is the rhythm of safety, slow, steady, timeless. For centuries, travelers and shepherds alike used fires not just for warmth, but as quiet beacons. They marked paths home, kept wild animals at bay, and helped people navigate through the blackness of night. The light of a fire was hope in physical form, a reminder that even the smallest flame could stand against the endless dark. Each spark carried meaning. Each ember was proof that the world could still be kind. When people looked into the flames, they didn't see danger or mystery, they saw endurance. The same element that could destroy also protected, depending on how it was treated. Fire taught balance. Care for it, and it will care for you. As the fire burned lower, people would draw closer. The flicker of light softened the edges of the world. Beyond its reach, the forest remained dark and unknowable, yet somehow less intimidating now. The warmth became a bridge between the body and the mind, easing both into quiet rest. Conversations around the fire rarely grew loud. Instead, voices softened, words slowed, and silences stretched comfortably between thoughts. People spoke of weather, harvests, and journeys. Sometimes they said nothing at all, content to simply listen to the fire breathing beside them. The calm it created was its own kind of language. It was common for families to keep a small fire burning through the night, not for light, but for presence. The soft glow reminded them that dawn would come again, as it always had. That flame became a heartbeat of the household, a rhythm that carried through generations, from one quiet night to the next. Pause here for a breath. Feel the weight of stillness. That same comfort once wrapped around countless travelers long before us. The warmth of fire, the hush of trees, the quiet pulse of safety in the middle of darkness. All reminders that calm doesn't need to be loud, it simply needs to exist. For people in the past, fire also shaped memory. Stories told beside it lingered longer, words carried by smoke into the night air. Even when no one spoke, the fire seemed to listen, collecting tales, fears, and dreams in its shifting light. When morning came, only ashes remained, but the stories stayed alive in the minds of those who listened. Some said that the way fire moved was a reflection of the human spirit, restless, glowing, and searching for calm. They saw in its dance the reminder that light and darkness were part of the same design, and that, perhaps, every person carried a small flame inside the warmth of endurance, of patience, of quiet strength. The further one traveled from villages, the more precious that small light became. A single spark could mean survival, and yet, those who carried fire also carried a piece of home, something familiar that connected them to everyone else who had ever sat beneath the stars. In the endless wilderness, fire was a thread of humanity. Even now, the image remains timeless. A fire glowing in the dark, the sound of logs settling, a face lit by soft orange light. These moments are stitched into human memory, the comfort of knowing that warmth can always return, no matter how deep the night. Take a slow, deep breath. Let the glow of that imagined fire fill your thoughts. Its warmth doesn't burn, it soothes. It invites you to rest, to be still, to listen. Because for thousands of years, that same light has whispered the same message. The night is vast, but you are safe within its calm. When the fires grew dim and the forests stretched endlessly into the dark, there were moments when people felt the night was not entirely theirs. They knew they shared it with other lives, eyes that glimmered, voices that howled, and shapes that moved just beyond sight. The woods were alive, and those who lived close to them learned to listen carefully. Before cities spread and fences divided the land, wild animals roamed freely. Wolves, boars, bears, and great cats once ruled the edges of human settlement. To villagers, these creatures were not monsters, only reminders that the world was still vast and untamed. They inspired caution, not hatred, respect, not vengeance. The sound of a wolf's howl in the distance could send chills down the spine, but it was also strangely beautiful. It marked the rhythm of life outside the safety of firelight. To hear it was to remember how fragile the night could be, and how resilient humans had to become to survive it. Travelers crossing lonely paths often spoke of the stillness that followed certain sounds. When the forest went quiet, it meant something was near. Perhaps a wolf, perhaps a bear, perhaps just the wind shifting. In those moments, fear wasn't an emotion, it was instinct. A whisper from within saying, "Be alert, be aware." Let yourself imagine standing there for a moment. The path narrow, the trees thick, the moon barely a sliver of light. You can hear the breath of the forest, slow, deep, alive. Every sound means something, and yet most are harmless. The night teaches that fear, when guided by patience, becomes wisdom. Wolves were often the most misunderstood. They hunted not out of malice, but necessity. They moved in silence, their steps almost invisible in the snow. To the people of the past, wolves were symbols of both danger and grace. Predators, yes, but also teachers in unity and endurance. They lived by order, caring for their own with loyalty that humans recognized. Boars, on the other hand, brought real dread. They charged without warning, fast and fearless. Hunters spoke of their strength and intelligence, their ability to vanish into the undergrowth as though swallowed by the earth itself. A single sound, a branch breaking, could mean that one was near. Even the bravest travelers knew better than to walk carelessly. Pause here for a breath. You might hear that imaginary forest again, a rustle in the leaves, a sigh of wind through tall grass. Nothing threatens you here. The animals are simply part of the balance that shaped human history, each living by its own rule of survival. In truth, these creatures shaped the way humans built their world. Fences, fires, and settlements were not only made for comfort, they were boundaries drawn between people and the wilderness. Yet, behind every wall and every flame, people still carried the memory of those glowing eyes in the dark, not out of fear, but out of respect for what could not be tamed. Even centuries later, long after most of those animals faded from daily life, their presence lingered in stories, warnings, and lullabies. The tales were not meant to frighten children, but to teach them caution, to help them remember that safety is earned, and that nature, when respected, always gives peace in return. As the centuries passed, people began to see these creatures not only as threats, but as lessons in survival. The way wolves worked together taught them the strength of family and loyalty. The persistence of bears reminded them of patience and endurance. Even the quiet flight of an owl came to symbolize awareness, a wisdom born from stillness. Hunters and herders alike developed an understanding built on observation. They learned how to read tracks in the soil, how to tell when an animal was near by the scent of the wind. Knowledge replaced fear, and in its place came respect. Those who learned to coexist with nature often lived longer, healthier lives than those who fought against it. Some people described hearing the low growl of a wolf as something humbling rather than terrifying. It reminded them that humans were never the center of creation, only a part of it. The same forests that sheltered them also belonged to the animals. To walk through that world was to walk with care, aware that every sound, every breath, belonged to something living. Pause for a moment and let that thought rest. You're surrounded by calm. You can almost hear the heartbeat of the earth beneath your feet, steady, patient, eternal. That rhythm has guided every creature, human or animal, through countless nights like this one. In time, these animals became woven into stories. A fox symbolized cleverness, a bear stood for courage, a wolf for unity and endurance. Through them, people expressed lessons about life, family, and survival. Fear gave way to meaning, and meaning gave way to understanding. For those who lived on the edge of wild lands, fear itself became a tool. It taught awareness, humility, and the wisdom to prepare. When people listened closely to the forest, they learned when to stay still, when to move, and when to rest. Fear, in this way, was not weakness, it was guidance. Night after night, around small fires, these lessons were passed down. Parents told their children not to wander alone, not because the forest was evil, but because it was alive. The stories reminded them that the world was larger than they were, and that true peace came from respecting its limits. Some travelers even spoke fondly of their encounters with wild creatures. The glint of eyes in the distance, the shadow of a wolf moving silently across the snow. These memories stayed with them for life. In the vast emptiness of the wilderness, they felt connected to something steady, something that had always been there. As dawn returned, the fear faded. The calls of night animals gave way to birdsong, and the world felt familiar again. But in their hearts, people carried that quiet respect, a recognition that every creature played its part in keeping life in balance. So tonight, as you listen, let those old lessons linger. Fear can be gentle. It can guide you to caution, patience, and peace. Just as our ancestors did, you can rest knowing that, even in the dark, the world remains ordered, alive, aware, and beautifully balanced. As the night stretched longer and colder, travelers looked to one thing for comfort: the soft, golden light of a lantern. In a world without electricity or street lamps, that small flame meant safety, direction, and hope. To see it flicker through the trees after hours of walking in darkness was like finding a heartbeat in the middle of silence. Long before maps and signposts, paths through forests and fields were remembered by instinct. People followed the shapes of trees, the sound of rivers, or the feel of the wind on their faces. But when night fell, everything changed. The world became shapeless. Every tree looked the same, every sound uncertain. That was when the lantern became a traveler's most faithful companion. Lanterns were simple things, a flame protected by glass or metal, carried by hand or hung from a stick. Yet, to those who walked through the night, they were more than tools. The glow kept fear at a distance, marking a circle of safety wherever the traveler went. In the quiet dark, it was enough to see only a few steps ahead. Imagine holding such a lantern now. Its light wavers with every breath of wind. The air smells faintly of smoke and damp leaves. Each flicker of the flame draws your attention, steady, calming, alive. It doesn't show you the end of the path, only the next few steps, and somehow that is enough. For many, the act of lighting a lantern was almost like a promise, a quiet assurance to oneself: I will find my way back. The first spark was a moment of hope, a single light pushing against the endless dark. And as long as that light stayed alive, so did the traveler's courage. Pause here for a slow breath. You can almost feel the warmth of that light against your hands. The night beyond is quiet, patient, and vast. Yet inside this small circle of glow, you are safe, steady, and at peace. This is what our ancestors must have felt, a calm built not on certainty, but on trust. In old villages, people would hang lanterns along familiar routes, near bridges, crossroads, or the edges of fields. They weren't just for travelers. They were messages of care, signals that said, you were not lost. The path still waits for you. Each light marked the presence of a community, unseen, perhaps, but still watching over the road. Those lanterns became symbols of kindness. A farmer lighting one near his gate, a shepherd leaving one by a fence, or a mother placing one in her window until her family returned. It was a small act, but it meant everything. Light in the darkness, a reminder that even the loneliest path leads home. Even the faintest lantern could change how people moved through the world. The same forest that seemed endless without light became familiar again. The flickering glow softened the trees, revealed the trail, and made the unknown seem gentle once more. Light didn't banish the night, it simply reminded people that darkness could hold peace too. For travelers in earlier centuries, the sight of a distant lantern often meant the end of a long and uncertain road. That tiny light might belong to a village, a farmhouse, or a way station, a place where warmth, food, and voices awaited. In the silence of the night, it felt like the world was quietly guiding them home. Many diaries from the past describe that moment, the first glimmer of light after hours of darkness. The body was tired, the mind heavy with distance, yet the simple sight of a glow in the distance restored energy. It reminded them that safety was close, that the journey through the dark had not been in vain. In small communities, people learned to recognize one another's lanterns. A certain pattern of light might signal a shepherd returning, or a family member walking home. Every lantern told a story of patience, of endurance, of someone trusting the light to lead them back to where they belonged. Pause here for a moment. Imagine the sound of boots on a soft, muddy path. The lantern swings gently from your hand, painting gold circles on the ground. Each breath of wind makes the flame tremble, but it never goes out. That small light, fragile yet constant, has guided countless lives before you. By day, the world was full of color and sound. But by night, it reduced itself to essentials: breath, step, light, and faith in direction. For those who lived then, this simplicity wasn't frightening. It was grounding. It reminded them that progress need not be fast, only steady. When travelers finally returned, the first thing they often saw was the lantern waiting in the window. Its glow fell across the snow or the path, a quiet signal that they had been missed. The fire within might be small, yet its message was enormous. You are home. You were never forgotten. As the night deepened and the last travelers arrived, villagers would extinguish the lights one by one. Each fading flame meant another safe return, another journey completed. In that simple act, they celebrated quietly. No feasts, no fanfare, only gratitude expressed through light and rest. For some, the lantern became a symbol of patience, a companion through loneliness. Those who worked far from home carried small lamps with them, knowing that its glow represented comfort waiting somewhere ahead. The flicker became more than light. It was memory, hope, and calm made visible. Take a slow breath. Imagine setting your lantern down beside a quiet doorway, the flame still dancing faintly in the wind. The journey is over now. The woods are behind you. The light you carried has done its work, and in the hush that follows, all that remains is peace. And as the last candle is blown out, the world returns to its natural rhythm. The night exhales, the forest settles, and silence becomes a friend once again. The path is no longer a place of fear, only a reminder that every step, no matter how dark, eventually leads toward home. When morning came, after a long night of travel, the forest looked different. The same trees that had seemed mysterious in the dark now stood calmly in the light. Their branches reached high and still, as though holding stories too heavy to tell. People once said that the oldest trees remembered, not as living minds, but as witnesses to everything that had passed beneath their shade. For many generations, people marked their lives beside these trees. They met there, worked there, rested there. A tree that had seen one family grow old would one day shade their grandchildren. Its roots spread quietly beneath the soil, connecting memory to earth in ways words could not. To walk among such trees was to walk through time itself. Each ring of wood hidden inside the trunk recorded a season, years of rain, of drought, of survival. Even when storms broke branches or lightning scarred the bark, the trees endured. They became silent testaments to patience, reminders that strength could exist without movement, and wisdom without words. Imagine placing your hand on one of those trunks now. The bark is rough, cool, and steady beneath your palm. You can almost feel a faint pulse, not of blood, but of age. Each ridge and crack tells a quiet story of sunlight, wind, and rain. It's a texture written by time. Some of the oldest trees in history were already ancient when the first cities were built. They stood as landmarks for travelers and gathering places for villagers. People carved marks into them, not to harm, but to remember. A date, a name, a symbol. Each carving was a conversation across generations. Pause here for a slow breath. Imagine that forest, vast and quiet under a pale morning sky. The air smells of moss and dew, the light filtering through green leaves. You walk slowly, carefully, and for a moment you realize nothing in nature rushes. The world moves at the pace of patience. In some regions, people treated old trees like archives of life. They learned to read their patterns, the twist of branches, the shape of roots, the color of leaves. From them, they could tell when seasons would change or when storms might come. Without words or tools, the trees spoke through rhythm and endurance. There was no mystery in it, only beauty. The tree gave shade because the Creator made it so. It offered fruit, shelter, and calm, not by choice, but by nature's design. And in that quiet understanding, people found peace. To sit beneath a tree was to remember how small and blessed life could be. As the day grew warmer, travelers rested in that shade, closing their eyes to the sound of wind rustling through leaves. It sounded almost like whispers, not voices, but motion, like pages of a book turning softly in the air. Each gust carried a sense of age, of stories that didn't need to be spoken to be felt. As centuries passed, people began to see these trees as quiet companions in the landscape of life. A field might change, a village might grow, but the same tall oak or cedar would stand, marking the place as if guarding its memory. Even when wars or storms passed through, the trees remained scarred, perhaps, but alive. To those who returned years later, that familiar tree was proof that time could move gently. Families often used the great trees as landmarks of belonging. They met there for gatherings, shared meals in the shade, or simply paused during work to rest. Children learned early which trees were the oldest, which bore the sweetest fruit, which provided the strongest shelter when rain began to fall. In a world that changed slowly, trees became a measure of trust. When people passed away, it was common for others to plant a sapling nearby. It was a quiet act, a symbol of gratitude, not ceremony. The new tree grew alongside the old, its roots spreading into the same soil. It carried forward a sense of connection, that every life, like every tree, left something behind to grow after it. Pause here for a slow, even breath. Listen, in your mind, to the soft sway of branches above. That sound, that gentle rustle, is the same one heard by people hundreds of years ago. The forest you imagine has always been the same calm, patient, alive. Over time, old trees began to represent wisdom in human storytelling. Not wisdom that spoke, but wisdom that endured. Their long lives reminded people that strength was not about resisting change, but about bending with it, about holding firm through storm and silence alike. Some travelers would lean against an ancient trunk at the end of a long journey and feel peace settle through their bodies. It wasn't the tree that granted calm, but the stillness it inspired. Its roots were deep, its presence unwavering, and in that steadfastness, people found rest. Even today, when most of us live far from forests, the image of an old tree carries comfort. It speaks of time moving slowly, of the natural rhythm that outlives hurry. In every park, in every garden, there are trees that have seen more seasons than we can imagine, quiet witnesses to countless lives passing beneath them. Take another deep breath. The air feels cooler now, touched by shade. You can almost hear the wind tracing through the leaves, whispering softly as it moves. It carries no message, only calm, a sound that has soothed travelers, farmers, and wanderers for as long as memory has existed. And as you rest beneath that imagined canopy, remember this: the old trees do not speak, yet they remind. They stand through storms and sun alike, quietly marking the passage of days, and in their silence, they hold what humans often forget, that peace is found not in motion, but in stillness that endures. When the cold crept in from the woods, and the wind began to whisper against the windows, people gathered close to the hearth. The steady flame in the center of the room was more than warmth. It was memory, comfort, and a small promise that the night would pass gently. It was here, beside the fire, that stories began. Every home had its storyteller. Sometimes it was an elder, their voice slow and measured. Sometimes it was a mother or father, their tone soft enough to carry over the crackle of wood. No matter who spoke, the rhythm was always the same, unhurried, careful, and filled with pauses that allowed the listener's imagination to drift. The hearth was the heart of the home. It cooked the food, lit the room, and warmed the air. But at night, it became something else, a quiet stage for history. Around it, tales of the past came to life. Stories of journeys, of work, of kindness, and of lessons learned under the sky. Imagine sitting there now. The room is dim, the fire glows low, and shadows move gently across the walls. You can hear the soft hum of conversation, the faint laughter of children fighting sleep, and the comforting rhythm of logs settling in the heat. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, but inside, everything feels still. These were the moments when fear melted away. The fire's light pushed back the dark, and the voices around it turned silence into warmth. The world outside might be vast and cold, but here, in this small circle of glow, life felt simple and good. Each story told was a way to remind one another that peace could be found even in quiet times. Pause here for a breath. You can almost feel the warmth of that room, the faint scent of smoke and wood, the calm that comes from shared stillness. Every flicker of the flame seems to breathe with you, slow, steady, alive. This is where people learned that history didn't always need to be written. Sometimes it only needed to be spoken. The stories told beside the hearth were not grand or heroic. They were gentle, ordinary tales of planting in spring, of surviving winter, of neighbors helping one another. These stories held the rhythm of daily life. They taught patience, humility, and gratitude, small lessons carried quietly through generations. Some stories were humorous, others deeply personal. A forgotten tool, a wandering traveler, a clever child who solved a problem adults could not. Laughter filled the spaces between words, and the fire seemed to join in, its popping embers echoing the joy of simple living. For a moment, the entire room felt alive with warmth and belonging, and as the story stretched into the night, time itself seemed to slow. The world beyond the door disappeared, leaving only voices, firelight, and calm hearts. Each story became a thread, weaving families together through memory, love, and shared silence. It wasn't just storytelling, it was a way of remembering who they were. As the hours grew late, the fire settled into a deep orange glow. The wood no longer burned with tall flames, it pulsed quietly, like a steady heartbeat within the house. Children leaned against their parents' shoulders, their eyelids heavy, while the storyteller's voice softened until it was almost a whisper. Each story found its own ending, not with applause or grand meaning, but with silence. A pause, a sigh, the sound of someone shifting closer to the warmth. The lesson was never spoken aloud, it simply lingered, gentle and complete, somewhere between the smoke and the stillness. It was said that the best storytellers didn't speak for attention, they spoke for calm. Their words were slow enough to match the rhythm of the listener's breath, guiding minds away from worry and toward rest. The hearth became their companion, every flicker of flame marking the pace of the tale. Pause here for a breath. Imagine the room in that half-light, the warmth wrapping round you like a soft blanket. The fire hums quietly. The night feels endless but kind. In moments like these, time seems to dissolve, only the present remains, glowing and gentle. The stories told beside the hearth weren't meant to survive in books. They lived only in memory, passed down like embers carried from one fire to another. Each retelling changed slightly, not through error, but through love. It was how people kept the past alive, reshaping it softly to suit each new night. When dawn approached, someone would stir the ashes and whisper that it was time to rest. The storyteller would smile, tuck a log onto the embers, and let the light fade slowly into grey. Outside, the sky began to pale, and the birds prepared their first call. Inside, peace remained quiet, familiar, everlasting. In those final moments before sleep, people often thought of the forest, the roads, and the long nights they had survived. All of it seemed far away now, softened by warmth and memory. The stories had done their work. They had turned fear into reflection, loneliness into comfort, and distance into closeness. Some of those same stories still exist today, hidden in old songs or fragments of letters. They are reminders of the nights when words were the only light people needed, when calm was shared, not sought. Even if the flames have long gone out, the warmth of those moments remains in every quiet evening we create for ourselves. Take a slow, deep breath. The hearthlight fades, the house grows still, and the last echoes of laughter drift into silence. The story has ended, but the calm remains. And as the smoke rises gently into the night, It carries with it the simple truth our ancestors knew well, that peace is found not in noise, but in shared stillness. When the fire had burned low and the last story had been told, night would take its full shape again. The world outside was quiet, the forest still wrapped in its own deep silence. Only the faint glow from the hearth touched the walls, flickering gently like a memory that refused to leave. In that stillness, people felt not fear, but peace. It was a familiar peace, the kind that came after long hours of work and conversation. The forest beyond the village, once full of rustling shadows, now seemed to rest. The sounds that once caused worry, the hoot of an owl, the creak of a branch, felt like a lullaby. The night no longer belonged to the unknown. It had become a part of home. For those who had listened to the old tales, this quiet was the true ending. Not every story needed a hero or a grand resolution. Sometimes, the perfect ending was simply silence, a shared moment where everyone could breathe, listen, and know that all was well. Peace, after all, was the truest story of them all. Imagine stepping outside now. The air is cool, brushed with the scent of earth and ash. A faint mist curls round the ground, and the trees stand dark but calm against the fading stars. You can almost hear the slow rhythm of the world preparing for dawn, soft, patient, steady. The ground beneath your feet is damp from the night's dew. Each step feels deliberate, quiet, as though you are walking through the very memory of the evening itself. In that soft darkness, there is nothing to fear. The forest, the sky, and the wind all seem to move in harmony, a balance that has always existed, waiting to be noticed. Pause here for a long, even breath. The world is vast, but for this moment, it feels small enough to hold. Each sound a whisper of leaves, a sigh of air, folds into calm. It reminds you that stillness isn't emptiness. It's the quiet presence of everything that matters. For travelers long ago, this moment meant safety. They had made it through the night. The fires had burned, the paths had led them home, and the woods had offered passage instead of peril. The calm beyond the trees was not the end of the story, it was the reward for patience. In that silence, people found gratitude, not through words, but through simple awareness. The warmth of the hearth still on their skin, the cool air of dawn on their face. It was the feeling of being exactly where they needed to be, alive, sheltered, and at peace with the world. And as they looked toward the horizon, waiting for the first trace of light, they understood something timeless. The forest, the night, and the calm were all parts of the same rhythm. Each one passed gently into the next, teaching that every darkness ends, not with noise, but with quiet renewal. As dawn began to break, the line between night and day softened. Mist floated through the air like breath, and the first rays of light touched the treetops in pale gold. The forest stirred, not with sound, but with quiet awakening, a return to motion after hours of stillness. Everything that had felt mysterious in the dark now seemed familiar again, softened by morning. Villagers would step outside to breathe the new air. The chill on their faces reminded them that another day had arrived. Fires were rekindled, doors opened, and the smell of smoke and bread drifted together. It was a rhythm as old as life itself: rest, wake, and begin again. For travelers who had walked through the night, this moment was their victory. Their lanterns dimmed, their footsteps slowed, and every sound now felt gentle. The world had not changed overnight, only their understanding of it had. Where fear once lived, peace had taken its place. The forest, too, seemed to sigh. Birds began their calls, distant at first, then clear and bright. The same trees that loomed tall and watchful under the moon now glowed softly in the sun. They stood as witnesses to yet another quiet journey completed, another story safely ended. Pause here for one more deep breath. You've walked through the woods, stood by the fires, followed the lanterns, and rested beneath ancient trees. Each part of this journey has led to the same quiet truth, that calm has always existed, waiting for us to notice it. The past isn't gone. It simply rests in the same peace we seek tonight. As the sun rises higher, imagine turning away from the forest path. Behind you lies the whispering night, the warmth of stories, and the steady comfort of firelight. Ahead lies morning light, new and full of quiet promise. The world feels wide again, yet somehow smaller, more kind. It's in these moments, between night and day, between story and silence, that history feels closest. The people who once lived, walked, and watched the same stars are not far away. Their calm, their patience, and their endurance still shape the world we know. And as their stories fade into the breeze, they leave behind peace for us to find again. You can let your thoughts drift now. The forest fades into memory. The fire burns low. All that remains is stillness, soft, patient, complete. If sleep comes for you here, let it. You've earned the rest. Thank you for walking through this quiet corner of history with me tonight. If you've enjoyed this gentle journey through time, I invite you to subscribe and return next time. There's always another forgotten story waiting for you. And in our next calm exploration, we'll travel to the silent remains of Old England to uncover why people abandoned the Great Plague, villages, towns once full of life, now left behind by time itself. Until then, rest well. May your night be peaceful, your mind untroubled, and your dreams quiet as the calm beyond the trees.